All right, so we're gonna look at adding and subtracting fractions. All right, the first thing we're gonna really look at is talking about different parts of a fraction. So just kind of add these to the side. So if say we have, let's go with the number 3/4. All right, if we have those, remember the top number is called your numerator and your bottom number is called your denominator. I'm going to be using both those terms quite a bit. So make sure you really understand numerator is your top or your upper number. Denominator is your bottom or your down number. All right, so those are the parts of a fraction you need to make sure you know. You need to know your numerator and your denominator. So when we're adding and subtracting fractions, there are two types we're going to deal with. The first type we're going to talk about today is fractions that have a common denominator. So fractions that have a common denominator. The first thing you do is you add or subtract, whatever the operation tells you, the numerator. The second thing you do, you keep the denominator. So your denominator stays the same. And then the last step is you simplify. And that's only if necessary. Sometimes you don't need to simplify a fraction. Right? So this is the first type. The first type, they have a common denominator. So these are the steps we're going to follow. As you can see, again, I use the numerator and denominator. Those are terms we just talked about. So let's look at some examples. Example 1. We have 5/11 plus 3/11. Well, our denominator is the same. They both are 11. So we're just going to add or subtract the numerator. The numerator is our top number. So we're going to take 5 plus 3. We're going to add because it tells us to. 5 plus 3 is 8. We keep our denominator, so it's 11. Do we need to simplify? Well, 8 and 11, they don't have a common factor, so we are done. So 5/11 plus 3/11 is 8/11. Example 2. 6/13 minus 2/13. We have a common denominator, so we subtract the numerator. 6 minus 2 is 4. And our denominator stays the same, so we have 4/13. So look at example 3 for our third example. Example 3, we have 3/10 plus 1/10. Denominator is the same, so let's add our numerators. 3 and 1 is 4. 10 stays the same, so we have 4/10. This is where simplifying comes into play. Both 4 and 10 are even numbers, meaning they both are divisible by 2. So we're going to divide them by 2. Divide by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. 2 and 5, the only common factor is 1. So we are done. Example 4. 7/12 minus 5/12. Our denominator is the same, so we just subtract the numerators. 7 minus 5 is 2. 12 stays the same. 2 and 12, they both are even, so that means they're both divisible by 2. Divide by 2. And we get 1/6. Their common factor is 1. Thus, we know we are done. So this is how we add or subtract fractions with a common denominator. The second type, or type 2, is if they have and uncommon denominator. This is where things start to get a little fuzzy. So if they don't have a common denominator, you must find the LCD. LCD stands for least common denominator. Sometimes if you just want to find a common denominator, that is perfectly fine, but ideally you want the least common denominator. After you do that, you multiply both the denominator and the numerator by that multiple. And we'll go over that in an example. Then we are going to add or subtract our new numerator we keep the new denominator and then we simplify if necessary. And as you saw with some of our previous examples, sometimes it's not always necessary. There are a handful of times it is. So let's look at some examples. So example 5. We have 1/3 plus 2/9. Our denominators are not the same, so we need to find the least common denominator. What we need to do is we need to figure out what is a multiple that's the same between 3 and 9. Well, if we go through 3, 6, 9, 12. Okay, so those are 3. 9 is 9, 18. Hey, we hit one with 9. So our new denominator is going to be 9. So I always like to set it up like this. I now figured out what my new denominator is. What times 3 gives me 9? Well, 3. And I need to multiply both the denominator and numerator. So if I multiply the bottom by 3, I have to multiply the top by 3. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 3 is 9. Boom. 9 is already 9, so I don't need to change this one. We now have a common denominator. Add our numerators. 3 and 2 is 5. Denominator stays the same. We have 5/9. No need to simplify. Example 6. 10/11 minus 3/22. We do not have a common denominator. We need to figure out what our common denominator is. Well, we think 11, 22, 33, 44. 22 is 22, 44. Oh, I hit one with 22. So our new denominator is going to be 22. Well, 11 times what gives me 22? 11 times 2. If I multiply the bottom by 2, I got to multiply the top by 2. 2 times 10 is 20. Okay. I don't need to do anything here because 22 is already there. Now I just do math. 20 minus 3 is 17. 17 over 22. And we are done. Okay. Let's go on to our next one. Example 7. 2/5 plus 1/6. We do not have a common denominator. We need to figure out what our common denominator is. Well, this time it's not one of those numbers. Like here, it was one of the numbers. This time, well, 5 can't go into 6, 6 can't go into 5, so now I need to list them out. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. Okay, 6, 12, 18, 24, 30. Ooh, 30. So we know our new denominators are going to be 30. 5 times what gives me 30? 5 times 6. If I multiply the bottom by 6, I got to multiply the top by 6. 6 times 2 is 12. Next, how do I get from 6 to 30? I multiply by 5. If I multiply the bottom by 5, I got to multiply the top by 5. 5 times 6 is 30. 5 times 1 is 5. Now I just do some math. 12 plus 5 is 17. 17 over 30. I can't simplify because the common factor is 1. Boom. And let's look at example 8. Five ninths minus 1/2. We need a common denominator. Well, if we figure it out, it's 18 minus something over 18. Well, 9 times what gives me 18? 9 times 2. If I multiply the bottom by 2, I gotta multiply the top by 2. 2 times 5 is 10. How do I get from 2 to 18? I multiply by 9. I gotta multiply the top by 9 as well. 1 times 9 is 9. Now I just do some math. 10 eighteenths minus 9 eighteenths. 10 minus 9 is 1 over 18. They don't need to be simplified. Now, hopefully you guys saw here, when I had 2/5 plus 1/6, this side I multiplied by 6, this side I multiplied by 5. Sometimes this worked, just multiply by the other denominator. Here it worked as well. That doesn't always, well, it always works, but sometimes you can get a smaller one by multiplying by a smaller number. So those are the two. You have ones with a common denominator, ones with an uncommon denominator. Those are the types of fractions you could be adding or subtracting.